Hello there. Welcome to Interval Notation, Chapter 3-6, page 203. Put down your topic and your name, hour, and let's get going. Let's not mess around. We're talking about this right here, interval notation. Please get that down as your first keyword, and I'll introduce that to you, and you can get help on page 203 if you need it later. Okay, well, let's hit pause as you go, and I'll try to keep things moving for your benefit. What is interval notation? Let's write it right here. I did a little smart notebook trick. There it is right there. Simply put, it's a method to describe an interval on a number line. And we'll get into more details of that when we get into some examples here in a few minutes. What I'm going to do in the middle is just write some examples of what it looks like. Okay, and then I'll explain it in the examples following. So just get down the examples. It might look like this, a bracket that looks like that with some number, could be any number, and a comma, and then you might have an infinity symbol here, and next to the infinity symbol would be a parentheses, like that. That's an example of, one example of interval notation, and we'll get into the details of it shortly. It could also look like this, maybe a parenthesis on this side, and a negative infinity symbol with a comma, and then some other number here. I'm just randomly picking these numbers, and then that might be a parentheses. Okay, or you could have a parentheses, or it could have been a bracket, or you actually could have a couple of numbers like that, maybe a bracket. You could have two brackets. Whoops, -7. I'm just making up these numbers here, and again, you'll see what they mean in the examples. So you can have any combination of parentheses and brackets. Could have a parenthesis 9 and 15 with a bracket on. Though I did one like that. It could have a bracket on this side and a parenthesis on this side. Any combination of brackets and parentheses you can come up with would fit in there. Okay, so that's what it looks like. Let's break down the details of what all this stuff means. So if you would, put a dotted line on your paper under that. And to make my notes easier for you to read, I just break them up into separate pages. I found that seems to be work better. So under your dotted line, write the word parentheses. And here I'll discuss what it means to have what the parenthesis means. Okay. So before I look at an example, here's a description. Okay. You use parentheses. Okay. So use parentheses. Okay, when, and then this symbol, or this symbol, so here you got less than, here you got greater than, when one of those symbols indicates the interval endpoints are not included. Okay, hopefully you can write your notes there a little better than I can. All right, and that might not make much sense to you at this point. Look at the examples now and see what that means, okay? Let's say we had this example. Again, hit pause, get that down if you need it. Let's say we had this inequality, x is greater than 5. Okay, so if we look at this, we could think of all kinds of examples, like 6, 7. What could x be? 8, 9, 10. Pick a number greater than 5. So that means, basically, if you had that graph, okay, you could picture at 5 an open circle and all solutions greater than 5 that would look like this. Well, we have interval notation as a way to express that without a graph, but in something that looks very similar to ordered pairs. Basically, starting at 5 and going forever that way. Forever, you have an infinite number of solutions. So, since 5 is not included in my, as a solution, that's why we use a parenthesis 5. That means that the boundary starts at 5. That's what that parenthesis means. Then we go comma, infinity, because The infinity symbol means that those solutions can go on forever and ever. Now, whenever we use the infinity symbol, they just go ahead and use the parenthesis. And that's just the way they do that. Okay, it goes on forever and ever. So the main thing here is that you see that that 5 is a parenthesis because this is not included as the solution. Okay, let's say we had something like this. Let's say we had another one that said x is less than -2. Okay, well, if you think about that graph, here you've got -2 and an open circle, and you've got all solutions this direction. Okay, so basically anything less than -2 would be a solution. So if I were to write that, we would go parenthesis. Now the first thing I'm going to write is negative infinity because the solutions go to infinity in the negative direction. So whatever the left boundary is the part that goes on the left. Now it stops at 2, but 2 is not included in the set of solutions. Excuse me. So we write it like that. So that's what the parenthesis marks. So if we do the dotted line again, you may be 3/4 of the way down your page or maybe to the back at this point. Remember, you can use your own paper if you need it. You can print some off my website if necessary. You can probably figure out what the bracket does. Let's talk about the bracket. Okay, the bracket, here's the description. All right, use, now make the bracket, when, now here I'm going to do less than or equal to or greater than equal to symbol indicates the endpoints are included as solutions. Okay, so this would look something like this. Let's say I had x is greater than or equal to -4. Okay, x is greater than or equal to 4, so -4. So here we go. That means my graph might look something like this. All right, I got -4. Now you got a closed circle, right? Because 4 is included in that set, and it's all numbers greater than -4. So interval notation, to show that same thing, would have a bracket -4 like this. That is telling you to include the -4 as a solution, and the solutions continue on to infinity. That, and then we do the parenthesis whenever we do that next to infinity, we do it the parenthesis. So if we go x, here's another example, x is less than or equal to 10. All right, so again, the graph, if that makes sense to you, you've got a solid circle at 10. Solutions are less than 10. So that interval notation would be a parenthesis, negative infinity, comma, include the 10 with a bracket, like that. Okay? And so there you have basically the explanations of those brackets or parentheses in interval notation. And then the last piece we've already touched on is infinity. So really already talked about that, so I'll try to make this snappy for you. It's basically you use when interval continues, continues in a, let's say, positive direction. Okay, when you're going in a positive direction, that's where you use the infinity symbol, such as x is greater than 9. You'd go 9, comma, infinity. All right. If you have something like x is less than or equal to 12, you would use negative infinity to indicate, I can't write very well tonight, apparently indicate infinity in a negative direction. Okay, and that would look like you would have parenthesis negative infinity, comma 12 bracket. Okay, do a dotted line there, and I'm going to stop the tape and pick up in just a minute for part 2.